Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really significant, a major strategic shift, actually. Sources are calling it, well, shocking, but also long overdue. We're talking about a reportedly very bold move. It seems to be coming from a newly forming One Africa government initiative. And it looks like it's aiming to fundamentally reshape how Africa engages with, the traditional Western powers. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack some exclusive details. We've got leaks from African Union boardrooms, whispers from top diplomats, even private memos between states.
Right.
And all of it seems to point towards this massive reorientation in how Africa plans to deal with the world going forward.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to help you understand the core decisions being made here. What are the motivations behind them? And crucially, what could this all mean, for Africa's future, but also for global relations more broadly? We'll be pulling together a lot of different pieces of information to give you, hopefully, the clearest picture.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. The core event seems to have been a classified virtual summit held just 3 days ago.
Very recent.
Exactly. And this wasn't some minor chat. We're talking top AU leadership plus representatives from 27 African nations.
27, that's substantial.
It is. And according to a senior insider source, someone in the AU advisory circle, will call them Chairman Shadow to protect their identity. This key call was chaired by the AU chairperson, João Lourenço of Angola.
Okay.
And the administrative and policy side was handled by Mahmoud Ali Yusuf of Djibouti. He's the current chairperson of the African Union Commission.
I got it. So top-level involvement.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the agenda for this confidential vote, it covered two really urgent issues, both signaling this intention to pull diplomatic weight away from Western institutions.
Right.
First, should African nations freeze their participation in the next IMF round?
Oh, yeah.
And second, should they create a brand new African credit bank, one explicitly designed, it seems, to rival the World Bank?
So what was the outcome? Did they actually vote?
And they did. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The result was clear. 20 out of the 27 countries voted yes.
20 out of 27?
Yeah.
That's a strong majority. What's fascinating here is that this isn't just talk. Like you said, it's not a proposal floating around. It feels like a concrete collective decision.
Exactly.
And, historically, getting that kind of Pan-African economic unity has often been more aspirational than reality. So this vote, it suggests maybe a new level of strategic alignment. Could set a precedent, couldn't it?
It really could. So who are the key players pushing this? Which nations voted yes? Well, the sources name quite a few. Burkina Faso, and you have to think Ibrahim Traore's influence there is key.
Absolutely.
Then South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Algeria, Senegal, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Rwanda, Egypt. Quite a coalition.
That's a diverse group.
Yeah.
Geographically, politically.
It is. And why? What was their reasoning? According to another source, a trusted diplomat referred to as Mama Pan-Africa, these nations basically argued that Western institutions, well, they continue to profit from African poverty, and that it's simply time to redefine partnerships, make them based on equality, not pity was the phrase used.
Equality, not pity. That's powerful. It signals a real desire to break from those historical dependencies, doesn't it?
It really does. And there was this one quote reportedly from an Egyptian diplomat that just hammers it home.
What was it?
They give us loans with interest, but never freedom with value.
Wow. Yeah, that quote, it really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It highlights this fundamental challenge in international aid, this deep desire for genuine self-determination, an end to relationships that feel extractive.
Exactly. It prompts a hard look at the terms of engagement. So let's talk about the centerpiece of this whole shift, the proposed African Credit Bank, the ACB.
Right, the alternative institution.
Precisely. It's all laid out in a leaked document, apparently drafted by someone influential known as the Economist of Addis.
An interesting code name. Suggests some serious financial thinking behind it.
Seems like it. So the ACB, it's envisioned as a continental lending institution. Headquarters planned for Nairobi?
Nairobi, okay. A major hub.
Yeah, with branches planned for Accra, Addis Ababa, Lagos too.
Spreading the footprint.
And here's a really fascinating detail. The bank plans to lend and operate using a proposed Pan-African digital currency.
Digital, okay, that's forward-looking.
And it's supposed to be pegged to resource wealth, not the US dollar.
Pegged to resources. That's a major departure. How would that even work?
Well, the target is ambitious. Phase out dependency on the IMF and World Bank within 10 years.
10 years, that's fast.
It is. Key funders identified already are Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Africa. The heavyweights.
Makes sense. They'd have the clout.
And here's a little twist from the source. China has apparently expressed interest in backing it silently.
Silently. Interesting. So this move towards self-financing, it's a huge declaration of economic sovereignty, really.
Feels like it.
The real insight here, I think, is how this could fundamentally change Africa's negotiating power globally, moving from, aid recipient to an independent financial player. But from those leaked documents, do we get any sense of the practical hurdles? I mean, establishing a whole new currency system pegged to resources. How would commodity price swings affect stability? And getting 27 nations, or even the 20 who voted yes to fully adopt it, that requires immense consensus, right?
Those are absolutely the key questions. And yeah, the documents do seem to acknowledge the complexities. They mentioned the resource peg wouldn't be just one commodity, but like a basket of key African resources, to try and smooth out the volatility of any single one.
Okay, diversification. Smart.
And they see the initial buy-in from these 20 nations as that critical first step. The plan seems to be a phased approach, managing the transition carefully rather than a sudden switch.
Right. A gradual rollout makes sense. Less disruptive.
So, okay, this vote happens, the plan is forming. What were the immediate reactions? How did the West take this rather bold move?
Yeah, I imagine the phone lines were busy.
You bet. According to Protocol Black, that's the AU technician source who apparently monitors internal comms.
Okay.
The West got the message loud and clear. There was allegedly a request for an emergency intelligence briefing by the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, like right after the AU meeting.
An emergency briefing. That tells you something.
Doesn't it? And an anonymous EU source reportedly described the plan as, and I quote, the most direct threat to post-colonial economic power we've seen since the non-aligned movement.
Wow. Strong words. Post-colonial economic power. They're not mincing words.
Not at all. And France apparently is particularly frustrated, especially given that former colonies like Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali, they were among the strong supporters.
Ah, that historical connection or tension, I suppose.
Seems like it. And you mentioned Ibrahim Traoré earlier.
Yes, from Burkina Faso.
Well, apparently he was a huge catalyst in the meeting itself. Maybe not the loudest voice throughout, but Chairman Shadow, our source, said he made this unforgettable statement. He said, Africa will no longer be a market for their leftovers. We will now be the kitchen.
We will now be the kitchen. Powerful imagery.
The source said it shook the virtual table. Apparently, even the South African delegates paused, and Botswana's diplomat, usually quite reserved, actually stood up and clapped.
Just stood up and clapped in a virtual meeting.
That's the report. That single quote seems to capture the whole feeling. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the years, maybe decades, of frustration building up to that kind of declaration.
Absolutely. A real watershed moment, perhaps?
And it's not just the diplomats feeling this way. The source highlights massive support among young Africans. Across TikTok, Twitter, WhatsApp, people are cheering this on.
The youth are engaged. That's crucial.
Definitely. Examples given include student protests in Ghana University students holding signs saying, "One Africa, no chains."
No chains. Clear message.
And in Nigeria, there was this viral video going around showing young software developers already creating mock-up apps for the African Credit Bank.
Wow. Proactive, building the tools already.
Yeah. And even war veterans in Zimbabwe are mentioned as openly supporting the move away from IMF reliance.
So it cuts across generations, too. Veterans and youth.
Exactly.
What's really fascinating here is seeing this support manifest at so many different levels of society.
Yeah.
You've got the top diplomats making strategic calls, then the youth embracing it online and in the streets, and even veterans voicing approval. It really does feel like a kind of continental awakening, as the source put it.
Yeah.
A shared vision taking shape. It suggests this isn't just some top-down policy shift, but it's tapping into something deeper, a broader societal current.
Right. So let's talk facts for a second. Why now? Why is Africa perhaps uniquely positioned for this kind of massive shift?
Good question. What are the underlying strengths?
Well, the numbers the source provides are pretty stark. Africa holds 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. 60%.
Huge agricultural potential.
Huge. Then resources. The continent controls something like 90% of global platinum reserves, 70% of coltan, which is vital for electronics, batteries.
Critical minerals, yeah.
And 40% of gold reserves. Plus, demographically, it's the youngest continent on Earth. 70% of the population is under 30.
Young. resource rich.
Yeah.
So this really prompts the question, doesn't it?
Mm.
Why haven't these incredible strengths been fully leveraged by Africans for Africans before now?
Exactly.
And the source draws that contrast. You mentioned Africa borrowing from old men in old buildings in Washington and Brussels.
Yeah.
So the core idea now seems to be that these resource-backed decisions, they need to be made by Africans, for Africans,
Yeah.
directly tackling that historical challenge of translating natural wealth into widespread development.
Right. But it's crucial to address one point the source makes very clearly. Is this whole thing just anti-West?
Potential interpretation.
But the source explicitly states this is not anti-West, this is pro-Africa.
That's a really important distinction to make. It's about assertion, not necessarily confrontation or isolation.
Right.
The goal, as they put it, is to still trade, still partner, still build, but, and this is the key part, ending the blind loyalty to systems that don't serve us.
Blind loyalty. Strong phrasing.
It is. But you mentioned earlier the source talks about building new highways, not burning bridges. How do they envision doing that? I mean, how do you maintain existing trade with the West while simultaneously challenging these very powerful, long-standing economic structures? Do the sources give any examples of navigating that balance? Seems tricky.
That's a fair point. The sources seem to suggest it's about a gradual transition. This new credit system, the ACB, would initially run in parallel with existing systems.
Okay, parallel systems.
Yeah, allowing nations to slowly, over that 5-year time frame, reduce their exposure to the IMF and World Bank rather than a sudden cutoff. The feeling seems to be the economic relationship will change, yes, but the door for equitable trade stays open, just on Africa's terms this time.
On Africa's terms, that's the core message.
Exactly. As Chairman Shadow apparently put it, we are not burning bridges, we are building new highways, and this time we are the engineers.
We are the engineers. I like that. It really reflects that shift towards critical thinking, questioning old assumptions that maybe don't fit anymore.
Absolutely. So, okay, where does this go next? What's the immediate future for this pretty groundbreaking initiative?
The next steps, yeah.
Well, a crucial event is apparently scheduled for next week. The African Union Parliament, meeting in Pretoria, is set to vote on whether to make the African Credit Bank official AU policy.
A formal ratification vote. That's big.
It is, and if it passes, the proposed implications are quite something. Each member country backing it would be required to contribute 0.4% of its GDP towards the startup funds.
So it's 0.4% of GDP across potentially 20-plus countries. That's serious seed capital.
Serious money. Then countries would begin that gradual reduction of IMF and World Bank exposure over 5 years.
The phased withdrawal.
Right. And interestingly, they plan to launch continent-wide AU financial education programs in schools, in universities.
Financial education, too. That's smart. Building capacity from the ground up.
Seems like it.
So basically, this is Africa writing its own playbook. Not just economically, but educationally, too. It demonstrates that focus on applied knowledge, fostering self-reliance for future generations, changing the mindset.
Yeah. And the ripples are already spreading beyond Africa. The source mentioned reactions from African Americans, from Pan-African thinkers in the U.S.
Oh, what are they saying?
One quote was, "I've waited my whole life to see Africa stand up like this. I don't care who leads as long as it's us."
Wow, that's powerful. The sense of collective pride, maybe?
Seems like it. Another person reflected, "This gives us hope maybe one day we'll come home to a continent that finally owns its future."
Owning its future? That theme keeps coming back.
It does, and global media is picking up on it too, of course. The BBC reportedly called it the boldest African maneuver in modern history.
High praise, or at least high significance.
Al Jazeera apparently stated, "Africa sends a message the world can't ignore."
Can't ignore. Seems accurate.
And the source noted, kind of cryptically, that CNN's coverage seemed like silent rotors confused, maybe implying they were caught off guard or unsure how to frame it.
Interesting observation. Maybe struggling to fit it into old narrative.
It'd be. Yeah.
You know, the source paints this really compelling picture of the future, doesn't it? This vision of a child born in Africa today.
Yeah, that was striking.
Growing up, able to study anywhere on the continent, start a business targeting 1 billion people, no border fees, funding from an African bank, traveling on an African passport, voting for a rotating president who gets their struggles.
It's a powerful vision.
And the source says, very directly, that's not a dream anymore. That's a decision.
That's a decision. Chills. What an incredible deep dive this has been, really unpacking this the strategic shift towards economic independence, self-determination. It feels unprecedented.
It really does.
It signals so clearly, doesn't it? Africa isn't begging to be seen anymore. It feels like it's standing united, ready to lead.
Hmm. If we just connect this to the bigger picture for a moment, it really raises a fascinating question for all of us, doesn't it? In this world where global power dynamics are constantly shifting, how might this determined pro-Africa stance actually influence things, not just for the continent itself, but for the future of global finance, international partnerships?
Yeah.
What are the ripple effects going to be in the coming decades?
A huge question. Definitely something for you to think about. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep digging deeper. We'll see you next time.